Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Middlesex University Childhood and Society SIG, our series for 2025, which is covering many topics and subjects of research from practice into research and research into practice. It's a safe space for us to network, dialogue, discuss, and get to know each other's areas of expertise, interests and areas, and try to kind of make links and connections to work further together and collaborate if possible. So I'd like to welcome Dr Abele Longo to our series today with this very exciting and interesting session that's going to be focused on standing with trees, proposals for an eco-pedagogy of poetry. And Dr Abele Longo, of course, is one of our Middlesex University's honorary scholars, and always an honour to have Abele participating in any of our projects on our series, and also chairing our and supporting the Child and Society seminar series. So over to you, Abele, and we look forward to a dialogue towards the end of our time together.
Many thanks, Angela. Okay, so my talk is inspired by my experience in participating in an educational project led by Emanuela Guarcello from the University of Turin at a primary school near Turin in 2022 and 2023. Specifically, I will focus on my involvement in teaching poetry from an ecopedagogical perspective in a Year 5 class, where Nicoletta Sibona was the main point of contact for the teaching staff. I have further developed this experience by proposing an ecopedagogy of poetry centered around trees, chosen for the deep connection we share with them, for what they represent, for their vital importance to our survival. Trees not only provide beauty, protection, food, wood, shade, and clean air, but they also offer access to clear water and comfort us by staying rooted while rising to great heights. From the earliest civilization, trees have played a significant role in our society, communities, and lives. The symbolism of trees has been woven into the fabric of humanity across many cultures, ranging from religious significance to their roles in stories and mythologies. But first, let's clarify what I mean by ecopedagogy and an ecopedagogy of poetry. Ecopedagogy, as I understood it, is rooted in the concept introduced by Paulo Freire and later expanded by scholars such as Antonia Darder, Richard Kahn. These thinkers, along with figures like Danilo Dolci, who collaborated with Freire, share the vision of environmental education deeply intertwined with Freire's humanistic ideals. In the context of today's environmental crisis, there is an urgent need for ecopedagogies that encourage critical thinking and foster active, responsible citizenship in children. Ecopedagogy seeks to blend Freire's focus on humanizing experience and the pursuit of a just, free world with an ecological politics that resist global spread of neoliberalism and imperialism. Richard Kahn pointed out that many existing environmental education models often fail to critically examine social structures. Instead, they tend to promote an anthropocentric worldview, treating nature merely as a resource for human exploitation. For ecopedagogy to be credible, it must critique this system of domination. It is not simply about experiential activities in nature. It is a framework that empowers children to confront and challenge the dominant power structures. The ultimate goal of ecopedagogy, according to Kahn, is to teach children to engage with the complexities of modern world through action, creativity, and dialogue, all grounded in respect for nature, justice, and a culture of peace. Kahn proposed an ecopedagogy that sustains life and creativity firmly grounded in a material and social understanding of our interconnected organic existence as a starting place for classroom practice and political strategies for reinventing the world. In the context of an ecopedagogy of poetry, the emphasis is on how teachers can use poetry in the classroom to guide children toward soulful engagement in their collective work. Through poetry, children are invited to experience the art form as something that awakens and enlightens. Poetry is conceived not only as an art form, but as a process of relational sensitivity. As Danilo Dolci eloquently puts it, each of us is capable through poetry of discovering the invisible, innumerable roots that reach out in every direction to connect us to the world. This approach encourages children to recognize the deep interconnected nature of existence through the medium of poetry. According to Gianni Rodari, teaching poetry signifies the emergence of a higher civilization within a school, one that teaches children that their role in the world is not to simply accept reality, execute tasks, and obey, but rather to become producers, creators, and transformers of the world. He further suggests that even if children leave school and no longer write poems, the essential need for poetry will likely remain. In any case, poetry will have served as an exercise in freedom, an education in freedom whose fruits will last a long time. Danilo Dolci, a fellow poet, shared Rodari's belief in the transformative power of teaching poetry to children. He argues that dreams comes to us through poetry, which serve us as a messenger of loving impulse and creative fervor, helping these dreams become reality. Poetry, Dolce asserts, is a song, sometimes a cry of rediscovered dignity, a loving act capable of revelation and liberation. He also emphasized that each of us is born with their own song inside, with their dream to express themselves. Still, Dolci adds that poetry must be nourished, but what he calls a realizable utopia, one that enables children to discover the strength to express themselves and develop the intuition to design something new. The teacher's mission is to guide children along the arduous yet necessary path to utopia. Utopia is dream, hope, and something more. The awareness of the dream and the commitment to make it a manifesto for one's existence. In ecopedagogical discourse, utopia is central and is understood by Freire as critical hope. However, believing that hope alone can transform the world may lead to despair, pessimism, and fatalism. As Freire writes in Pedagogy of Freedom, hope, when grounded in truth, gives ethical depth to the struggle for transformation. He further emphasized that this struggle requires the capacity to endure suffering, a deep love for humanity, and a spirit of tolerance. Utopia serves as an ethical force demanding rigor, critical thinking, and an unwavering commitment to the search for perspectives and practical paths, ones that lead to profound educational projects rooted in democracy and human dignity. So how can educators integrate poetry and utopia into their teaching? Dolci's answer is clear: by guiding children to engage in collaborative work and presenting poetry as a form of reciprocal maeutics. Dolci defines poetry as the passage from reality as it is to how it could be, a dialectic between being and desire. According to him, poetry has the power to corrode and dismantle structure of domination, emerging from the depths of mysterious yet to be created truth. He writes, through silent words from the most varied matter, Poetry enables us to express ourselves from infinite eyes, ears, tongues, infinite hands, and unpredictable seeds. At the same time, Dolci sees poetry, as I said, as a form of reciprocal maeutics, a dialectic method of inquiry that fosters the growth of consciousness. This method encourages participants to listen to different perspectives, acknowledge contradictions, and engage in deep questioning and excavation that goes beyond the surface to uncover what is hidden beneath tradition, custom, and stereotypes. Maeutics is helping to bring possible ideas, relationships, identities, and communities to light. It is the awareness of the need to find shared truths. Significantly, in their comic book on Danilo Dolci, Surian, Di Masi, and Martinos illustrate the concept of reciprocal maeutics through the image of an anthropomorphic tree, symbolizing interconnectedness, growth, and the emergence of new possibilities. Reference to trees abound in Dolci's writings, particularly in his poetry. In Dolci, the tree is an archetype emerging from the darkest depths of the earth, from the subsoil. Its roots take hold, making life burst forth in all its beauty. The seed sinks and decays in the darkness, only to rise like a newborn emerging from maternal waters before blooming in the light of the sun. The tree also serves as a powerful metaphor for life, resistance, meditation, and contemplation. Here is one of Dolci's poems inspired by trees, specifically eucalyptus. I read the translation of it. One of the transplanting the eucalyptus, barren in the soft spring, remained blackened, its bark stained in patches, and each time I returned, I found another arm torn away. Perhaps those who passed examined if it was still alive, at times carving into its skin, ripping pieces away to glimpse its soul. And today I find it again, torn to the knot of every armpit, with red leaves cracking through, alive even from a stump. Dolci identified a connection between the maeeutic structure and evolution, writing the natural world is not that violent version of the survival of the fittest. On the contrary, nature can be a completely interconnected evolutionary system in a process of harmonious development, in which even competition is part of a wider sphere of cooperation. He saw human beings as open system, much like the structure of inherently dialectical group, one that gains experience through communication and mediation, regulates itself through mutual support and inspiration, learns self-correction, and develops problem-solving skills to navigate towards a new and more complex harmony. Dolci recognized that abandoning old ways is sometimes essential for new things to emerge. He wrote, "The next revolution will be a revolution of humanity." Sorry, just a second. I think. Okay. So Dolci recognized that abandoning old ways is sometimes essential for new things to emerge. He wrote, "The next revolution will be a re-evolution of humanity that will deeply engage one of us and will lead to the recreation of ourselves and of our world." Expanding on this idea, I conclude that the universe evolves through both diversity and unity. Evolution advances through communication, an internal process where the interaction between different elements sustains and transforms us all. Dolci referred to this concept as reciprocal creative adaptation, a term used to define communication. His visions shares fundamental principles with the work of Russian naturalist and anarchist philosopher Peter Kropotkin, particularly in mutual aid, a factor in evolution. Fascinatingly, Kropotkin pointed out that Darwin, in The Descent of Man, wrote compellingly about how, in numberless animal societies, the struggle between separate individuals for the means of existence disappear. Struggle is replaced by cooperation, and that substitution results in the development of intellectual and moral faculties, which secure for the species the best condition for survival. However, Kropotkin argued that these aspects were not deeply examined by Darwin and received even less attention from his followers. I would like to link Dolci's concept of reciprocal creative adaptation and Kropotkin's mutual aid to Susanne Simard's Wood Wide Web, a discovery of mycorrhizal fungal networks that connects tree roots in forests, facilitating inter-tree communication through resource sharing, defense mechanism, and key recognition. So this underground network influences the sophisticated behaviors of neighboring trees. According to Simard, trees exhibit cognitive qualities, including perception, learning, and memory, which affect their traits related to survival and adaptation. In other words, Simard reveals that trees communicate, nurture one another, and even warn each other of threats and dangers. This image of cooperation, collaboration, and mutual support offers profound insight into the lives of trees, allowing us to connect more deeply with them and with nature itself. Another inspiring perspective comes from Stefano Mancuso, a leading advocate of plant intelligence, who defines intelligence as the ability to solve problems. Mancuso argues that plants process information, sleep, remember, and communicate, providing that, far from being passive organisms, plants are both aware and adaptive. Mancuso is a pioneer in plant neurobiology, a field that seeks to understand how plants perceive their environment and respond in an integrated way. He refers to Kropotkin's research in Siberia, emphasizing that in times of resource scarcity and environmental change, cooperation is far more effective than competition. In his later book, Phytopolis, Mancuso envisions planting trees in urban environments as a crucial solution for combating climate change. We produce, says Mancuso, 75% of our CO2 in cities, and the best way to remove it is by using trees. The closer trees are to the source of carbon emissions, the better they absorb it. Our studies suggest that we could plant around 200 billion trees in urban areas. To do this, we need to completely rethink our cities, envisioning them as places entirely covered with plants, where nature and urban life seamlessly coexist. Now, I would like to present some examples of how poetry can be introduced to children, drawing from a project conducted in Turin School by educator Nicoletta Sibona. Nicoletta introduced her Year 5 class to a poem titled Han desquajado un árbol, The Have Uprooted a Tree, by Rafael Alberti, a Spanish poet exiled after the Civil War. The poem, from Poemas de Punta del Este, describes a tree that in the morning stood young and joyful, caressed by the wind, the sun, and the birds. By evening, however, it lay uprooted, like a child exiled from its cradle, its tender limbs broken. The poet concludes that come nightfall, he will go out to close the tree's eyes and sing to it the song the wind once whispered that morning. After reading the poem, the children wrote about their reactions. They noted how the poet conveyed both sadness and tenderness towards the tree. Some observed that the poem emphasized the importance of treating nature with respect and care. Others highlighted how the poet personified the tree, treating it as a child, evoking both physical and emotional pain at its uprooting. Some students drew connections between the poems and Picasso's Guernica, a painting they had previously discussed. Just as the tree was violently and suddenly uprooted, so too was Guernica devastated by sudden, senseless destruction, with lives needlessly and carelessly sacrificed. Others compare the uprooted tree to the poet himself, exiled from his homeland. Inspired by the poem, the children began writing their own poetry on ecological themes. The ability to freely express thoughts through poetry, when linked to meaningful and carefully chosen stimuli, seemed to enhance their self-perception as valuable thinkers. Some children, never previously done in school, allowed teachers and classmates to witness their inner dialogue with their roots and personal histories. The teachers also introduced poetry readings from authors of diverse ethnic backgrounds, including those connected to some of the students' own heritage. Poetry does foster internal dialogue with each child, with themselves, with the text, and with their classroom community. This approach to teaching poetry aligns closely with Bernard Friot's visions of education. His book, The Aspiring Poet's Journal, is a valuable resource that can inspire both children and adults to create poetry and unlock the poet within everyone. The book serves as a year in poetry, emphasizing the importance of everyday life as a source of poetic inspiration and encouraging poetry to become a daily practice. It includes a series of creative exercises along with advice, suggestions, and examples on rhythm, word choice, settling, and style. Friot's contributions to teaching poetry has been enormous. His manifesto, Universal Rights to Poetry, which has been translated into several languages, is worth reading. I will just read some articles from this manifesto. Everyone has the right to be recognized as a poet because every human being is endowed with a poetic relationship to language. No institution, no group of self-declared or co-opted poets can refuse this title to one who wishes to obtain it. Everyone has the right to experience poetry as the easiest, freest, and therefore most democratic literary genre. Scholarly speeches on poetry, however interesting and necessarily they may be, should not be misused to reserve poetry for an elite. Everyone has the right to judge what is or isn't poetry to them, because a text becomes poetry only when it is read as such. Everyone has the right to learn how to read poetry in a free and creative way. A poem can be read aloud or silently, alone or with others, in its entirety or in fragments, and can be sung, illustrated, imitated, modified, copied. Reading is an act as creative as writing, and it is up to the reader to decide how they want to interpret the poem. Everyone has the right to access poetry for free through a diversified offer, libraries, posters, live or broadcast public readings, internet broadcasting, and so on. Um, there is a vast um, collection of poems about trees that can help children explore themes of life, nature, the environment, and many other topics. Reading these poems can also serve as an introduction to the study of their authors. Writers such, for instance, Henry David Thoreau, for instance, um, trees played a significant role in both his artistic creativity and philosophical thought. In his writing, trees emerge as images of the divine. He depicted forest trees as communities and villages, foreshadowing, if only metaphorically, the discovery of trees' social networks. Thoreau sketched them, interpreted their expressions, and appraised their character. He found happiness in the woods, writing that trees stir and expressions of joy and hilarity. He even called them his friends, his distant relatives, relations. An example of Thoreau's poems about trees is Friendship, dedicated to his friend and mentor Ralph Waldo Emerson. The poem offers a meditation on the nature, beauty, and power of friendship. Thoreau suggests that love is not defined by words, but by thoughts and actions. True love, he writes, is when truth, beauty, and goodness unite in a person, and this love transforms into friendship when such a person meets another of like mind. Friendship embodied by two good friends is like two sturdy oaks weathering a storm. They withstand the storm because they stand together, their roots interlinked beneath the ground. With this image, Thoreau implies that just as the essence of love cannot be spoken, the true strength of friendship lies unseen, like those roots underground. In the final stanza, the speaker reflects on how he and his friend barely resemble each other outwardly. To an observer, their bond is not immediately apparent. One must look deeper to see that their roots are intertwined. Through this metaphor, Thoreau conveys that their friendship is inseparable. Even time cannot untie their knots. Above they barely touch, but undermined down to the deepest source. Admiring you shall find their roots are intertwined inseparably. Walking along paths of trees, one can gain insights into great figures like Mahatma Gandhi, as an advocate of decentralized village center economy and a pioneer of nonviolent protest. Gandhi has long been regarded as an ideological ancestor of the environmental movement. Decades before the evidence of human-induced global warming emerged, Gandhi emphasized the importance of planting trees to help stabilize soil and water systems. One tree particularly dear to him was the banyan tree, a fig tree that develops accessory trunks from its prop roots, allowing it to spread indefinitely. Banyan trees hold a deep religious and cultural significance. In Hinduism, for instance, the leaf of the banyan tree is believed to be the resting place of the god Krishna. In 1942, during the Quit India movement, Gandhi visited Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh, where he held a meeting and planted a banyan sapling. Today, that sapling has grown into a vast tree, spreading over in an acre. As seen in the photo, this tree provides shade to many passerby and stands as a symbol of pride for the village. And here is a poem by Lakshmish Banyuri titled Gandhi at the Crossroad, in which Mahatma Gandhi is compared to a vast banyan tree. He grew and grew like a huge banyan with knotted roots and a leafy shade for us to sit under and introspect. He now stands at the crossroad, spectacled in stone, piercing through the dimness of truth, in iconic distance, in the labyrinths of history. The vendor still fights under the sun, under the load of his wares. The slum jeweler still droops in death, inebriating poverty. The capitalist still swoons in exultant vulgarity, brought from the sweat and blood of the down and outs. The Mahatma, in his statuesque immobility, carved in rocky apathy at the traffic signal, remains forever forgotten in the quagmire of life. I'd like to conclude with two more poems. The first poem is taken from Mossab Abu Toa's collection Forest of Noise, published in 2024. Mossab is a 31-year-old Palestinian poet. His house was bombed and his relative killed before he escaped to the US. Mossab was born in a refugee camp, Al-Shayati, but in 2000 the family moved to northern Gaza. His parents planted fruit trees, lemon, orange, peach, and mango trees. This move from a very compact place to a wide area of land is, he thinks, what made him a poet. Suddenly, I could see the sun, a wide area of land, is, he thinks, the reason itself for me being a poet. I could see the clouds, I could see the plants growing. After he married in 2015, he said, I built my apartment on top of theirs. My wife and I could see the border with Israel at our bedroom window. My children could see our neighbors, olive and lemon trees, blossom, puppies, and the mother breastfeeding. The poems of this collection are about things that news fails to capture. Um, Mossab says that on the news, maybe if someone is lucky, they would say their names or maybe the family name or the area where the bombing took place. But what the media fails to do is to tell the story of these people who got killed. I will read now a poem from Mossab collection called Mother and Mulberry Tree. There is a dog giving birth to 7 puppies beneath a white mulberry tree under the clear night sky. The dog groans with pain. Puppy after puppy cries, unaware where they are. For them, it's still dark, whether in her belly or outside. What country are we in? That's not a question for a puppy to ask. Only mother dog and the soul beneath can hear the branch of the mulberry tree. For every moon, a blossom comes out. From her bedroom window, a mother still awake watches the dog, its puppies, and the mulberry tree, while her child, eyes closed, suckles from her breast, and the drone watches over all. And finally, a poem of mine, because I believe one cannot write about poetry without also writing poetry. The title of the poem is Olive Trees. I was born in the Salento region in the southern Italy, a land that for centuries was defined by its landscape of olive trees. Their trunks curved and intertwined. Now, sadly, that landscape has become one of desolation, filled with dead and uprooted trees. Over the past 15 years, more than 21 million olive trees have been infected by the Xylella fastidiosa bacterium, which is spread by an insect and causes the trees to dry and ultimately die. So it's, yeah, you got the Italian version, Olivi, and I will read the translation, olive trees. Returning to my hometown from the airport, a reel of olive trees flickers past uprooted, stripped to lifeless trunks. Like the mourners at a funeral's head, a coffin bears the infected tree, bacteria-ridden mucus that chokes the veins, a sickness that carries away the elders with the groves. their fears quite surrender, the same hollowed eyes, wrists gone slack, gnarled roots or mirrored care. Thanks. I'd like also to thank my daughter, Sophia, who helped me with the slides. And
Wow.
and this photo as well, it's Sophia's photo. Okay. Thank you.
Wow, Abel, thank you. That was absolutely beautiful and profound and very provocative from start to finish. I think it one of my most favourite sessions. Thank you so much. And I know that those that couldn't attend today because of the meetings that we had clashing at the university will definitely be wanting to engage. Um, so I think I've got some feedback on that. I'll just have a look at the chat. So, wow. So Tremaine said, thank you so much, Abel. He had to leave again for another meeting because we've had it just
Yeah,
seems to be a day of
I totally
colliding.
understand. Yeah.
But he said he's really enjoyed your thoughtful ideas around the poetry and how it can be used to support and engage with the environmental educational aspects of his role and what he does. So that's from Tremaine, who's just left. But I just, for me, I know that we've got Lisa and Professor Farini who will come in here to want to engage with you as well. But just to share with you the love that I have for the point that you brought out at the beginning about the critical thinking. And I really love the poignant side that you said about the organic existence. I'm going to have to go off and think about that. I don't know what to do with that at the moment, but that was really powerful. And I really link that to my own love of dialogue and listening to children's expression through their voices and through their choices, through self-determination. So that's really provoked me there. So I'll come back to you on that. But I also like the way that you said that poetry is used to empower children to not accept the norms and to turn it upside down and to challenge and to provoke what they're engaged with, what they're seeing, and what maybe is quite authoritative sometimes, particularly through education. And poetry is a space for them to kind of make their own and to challenge those norms. And again, I'm really left with that with my rights-based advocacy role on. And I loved your point when you said our song from inside of us. That just reminds me of the children that I work with and how often their songs are heard and expressed and supported or pulled out, or how they're suppressed and ignored and not brought out. And that is just a wow. That was really provocative. And I like the critical hope, love the hope and the hopelessness, the hopefulness that we can have for poetry to listen to children. And again, I was really caught up with this reciprocal creative adaptation. I won't comment on it, but I'm just sharing with you what you've provoked with me. And I'm sure Lisa and Federica will come in here. And I suppose I'm just going to finish up again, relating to children's voices, a lot of the work that I do and with self-determination. I think the layers and the depth of communication that you talked, that poetry can reach, that maybe other dialogues can't reach, is a powerful model and mode. And again, the human and non-human intelligence and how we speak to the world that's non-human and how we engage with it and hear it, but don't even know that we're doing that. So you've provoked so much in such a small time through your session today, Abel. So I just want to thank you. And I'm guessing that Lisa might want to come in now to kind of share reflection. I don't know if you want to respond to what I've just said first before Lisa comes in or
No, thank you very
okay.
much. It's very much a comment yours. And what I like to add is that, yeah, of course, I really believe in what you highlighted. And also, there's another important element to consider, that poetry helps children to find themselves, their own voice, as you are also saying, but also to express that voice, to stand, to make themselves heard. So through poetry, they can say more, and they find the space, freedom for recognition as well of themselves. So in terms of identity, plays an important role. Um, it's a sort of special language, yeah, that gives them courage And also, of course, enhance their skills in terms of expressing themselves, and apart from creativity and all the rest, but making the self heard.
Mm, absolutely. I think through my own rights-based lens and children's self-determination, which is really my area that I'm just passionate about, that will depend again on how the adult's competence. Are they able to engage and listen and tune into that? And is the environment enabling, I guess, as something that I'm really provoked to think about.
Yeah.
On there. And I'm just thinking maybe we could get together, Abel, because I think we've got a crossover with self-determination and expression of the voice with this. So, and I'm really kind of linking some of my work that I've used with Bakhtin and his
Yeah.
centrifugal,
Dialogical,
centripetal,
yeah.
kind of how the poetry opens up worlds and expressions rather than close down through
Yeah.
classroom talk. So that could be something that we could engage in,
I mean,
perhaps.
the definition I gave, Dolce's definitions, of poetry as a form of reciprocal maieutic, I think is very much, in line with what you are saying. So Dolce really believed that poetry is dialogic, and also the use, he made of poetry was quite interesting because, I mean, not just for in his discussion with children, because of course he was interested in adult education as well. So he used to photocopy poetry, his own poetry, and to discuss them with children, but also to uh, make poetry together.
Mm.
So there was the idea of gathering all these different voices and then giving a form, to these voices. So, I mean, there are quite a few of his poems that in which actually he literally reproduce the language of the people, even the dialect, used in Sicily. So definitely gave voice to them. So it's a sort of choral, poem that comes out very
Mm.
often. It's not very sort of, self-centered sung as very often happens with poetry, So there's a type of poetry which can definitely be called dialogic, and that's what yeah, uh, Dolce was implying anyhow with the definition of a reciprocal maieutic approach. Yeah.
Yeah, and that I think that level of co-construction and immersion with each other to be able to construct together
Yeah.
is very powerful, but there's many layers to enable that to happen that sometimes can be taken for granted, that maybe some adults working with children need to enhance or be more reflective on to be able to do that. It's very skilled, you know, and lots of depth there. So yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Abel. I don't want to hog the time with you because I could talk to you for more on this. Lisa, can I come over to you? Are you gonna come in here?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for this provocative presentation. I am myself, very arts-based and playful with children. And so I haven't used poetry so much. I do much more of like visual arts with children. Um, but just hearing also what you said about um, the openness of poetry, that it's not just a poem because we're calling it a poem, but the openness to interpretation, like
Yeah.
any text can be a poem and we can receive a poem in any way. And I think that is really powerful and important for expression, but also, as you said, for the creation of worlds, having this creativity and the ability to take in and make our own sense of and then re-put back out into the world. is yeah, so empowering for children.
Yeah.
And frankly, adults and,
Yeah,
the
no, that's a very
educators
good
who
point.
are
Yeah, yeah,
working
yeah,
with the
yeah,
children,
yeah,
like
yeah,
all of us together in this co-construction
yeah,
process is, yeah, it's sort of actually, this idea is sort of the basis of the research that I'm working on now, but instead of arts or poetry, I'm thinking more about children's play.
yeah,
And exactly, Angela, as you were saying, I'm thinking a lot about how with children we attune to just what it is that they are doing and creating in the world. And often we miss it. We're not paying attention, or we are ascribing our own notions and preconceptions to what they are doing and to what they are saying. And so we are missing these possibilities for the co-construction of something new. And specifically, in the current times that
yeah,
we're living, we can't keep doing what has been done. And so being open to what children tell us that is unexpected, and that is creative and that somehow like surprises us or shocks us is exactly the kind of approach we need to be bringing into the spaces with children.
yeah,
So, yes, that's some of the things that I'm thinking about after hearing your presentation.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's important that you said for adults too, for which means for teachers too. So I mentioned um, 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 Rio's book. I don't have it here because yeah, it's for adults as well, and that's the most important thing, So thinking about poetry means, of course, something that um, it's not just for children, but mainly even more, I would say, for the adults too. So including teachers. So it's hopefully, yeah, teachers should have that approach too. So that these books that I mentioned before actually serve not just to teach children, but to teach themselves to become poet as well. I think that it's very important for teachers to be poets too, as children are. And that's, I think,
Exactly.
sometimes a problems. I mean, I saw that with my little experience, for instance, in these educational projects, that sometimes teachers, unfortunately, are not very much into poetry at all. In the sense, not that they don't know poetry, but they haven't really captured the importance of it. And they just see as something that, as a subject to be taught, without really understanding the potentials for them as well. So, yeah, we need to really be poets,
Well, I
ready to
love that
teach
you closed
poetry.
with your own poem
Yeah,
because, I mean, that is exactly what I do with play. I am
yeah,
sort of a play advocate, and I always say that we cannot support children's play in a meaningful way if we don't play ourselves.
exactly. That's a very
And
good point. Yeah, yeah,
and it's the same with the arts and poetry. And I think also what you're saying, you know, um, it's because there's also these expected definitions or, these boxes of like what poetry is or what
yeah,
art is or play is. And by doing that, we remove ourselves from it. And so
exactly, exactly. That's a very good
teachers
point. Yeah,
don't want to engage in
yeah,
poetry because I'm not a poet. But
yeah,
as soon as you open that up to, well, poetry can actually be anything that moves you,
yeah,
eh,
yeah.
that
Definitely.
changes the possibilities.
Definitely, exactly. So we really need a poetic approach. That's why, I call it poetic ecopedagogy in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to add on there as well, it's interesting. We always think about the children's poetry and the point that Lisa's brought up, that we need to be thinking about the adults and their
Yeah.
engagement with poetry, as you were saying earlier, Abel, as well. Because I think sometimes within the curricula, I'll just kind of blame the old curricula, but the curricula puts a lot of pressure on teachers as to what they're going to appreciate and what they're going to give time to. And is there enough time given to poetry? Because sometimes if the challenge of play or the challenge of poetry are not investigated and challenged and changed, like a bit, I'm going to go back to Bakhtin, centrifugal, centripetal, are the ideas and the language used around play and poetry quite closed, and they've got this very firm thinking about this is what poetry is, this is what play art is, and this is what we'll use it for in the educational terms. But actually it's not about using it, it's about engaging with it and enhancing and immersing with it so that the learning happens through these, and you're in coexistence with these huge concepts and part of everyday humanity. I mean, you know, I think sometimes education, and you know, I'm in education, so I'm talking about myself here as well, but we can forget the bigger picture, the holisticness of the human, non-human, the intention, and I think children are expressing themselves so much all the time through play, through poetry, through their, you know, physicalness, their, you know, cognitiveness, that again, we'll go back to it, we can miss so much of these expressions because us adults, we're very biased, we label, we've got our agenda, and if we're not engaging and reflecting poetically through these things, you know, like liberating ourselves, we're not going to be seeing what's there in front of us. We're only seeing what we think we need to see.
Exactly.
And then that impacts on children's voices, their opportunities, and we then don't learn. We're not, because the point that you brought in earlier, Abel, and then Lisa's brought in through play, children do stuff that shock us, and they bring us back to a place that we might have forgotten, which is so exciting when we go through poetry and play, you know. So such a lovely amalgamation there between the two concepts, I think.
Yeah.
So you really, so I think just to make sure, Federico's just said, oh, he wants to say thank you for today, Abel. He wants to share the recording with his educationalist and human geographers in Northampton. So,
thank
and
you very
I
much.
will, yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm going to be sharing this recording with my undergraduates.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
written with my English department because you know it doesn't exist anymore in this in this current climate. Just a quick comment from a sociological point of view, and it's a comment that introduces a problem.
Yeah.
And so what has been happening to literature, including poetry, in education, from higher education down to primary education, has been and this is why I mentioned the difficulties encountered by my English and literature department, my university. So it's been a struggle for many years now to justify their, you know, existence really. And a solution found was, well, a consequence of that, I believe, was to emphasize the academic aspect of literature, including poetry. And in order to justify, well, why am I here? Why am I being paid by you? Because I'm an expert on that, okay? And I can I can pass that level of knowledge that no one else can transmit to students. And that has closed a bit the spaces for a different approach to poetry, like your approach, which is actually the approach that that is ontologically intrinsic to poetry since I don't know how many thousand years ago. However, yeah, I see this risk that in order to survive, to justify their existence, all disciplines related to literature are, this is from an educational point of view, are emphasizing a lot their academic aspects, and that can really like undermine a more, I've heard the word holistic approach to it. It's just an observation that anyway could help explain why some time project like the one that you have mentioned are, well, there is a lot of work to be done to make sure that people understand and appreciate the project, okay? Just an observation. And thank you for the presentation, Abele. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Many thanks to you, Federico. And I can only agree with you. And yeah, many thanks for your insight. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to really thank you, Abele, massively for your expertise, your insights, and for sharing such a profound kind of opening and invitation to explore poetry in a very kind of sensitive and different way, and how we can enhance our advocacy, our practice, our research, and our publications when we're talking about children's voices. Really appreciate that. And Lisa and Federico and Tremaine again, and I know there'll be lots of engagement with this online as well, so thank you to everybody. Please do contact Dr Abele Longo further if you want to engage or research with his work. Abele, we might pop your email on the chat there if you get
Yes, please, thank you.
Yeah, do you mind doing it? And then
Yes, I actually can.
Yeah, and then our next Childhood and Society session will be on St Patrick's Day on the 17th of March. So I might have a green hat on that day, celebrate my Irishness. And that will be with Lourdes Kerr again, who is one of our colleagues here at Middlesex University, and she's going to be looking at the socio-dramatic play and its influence on self-regulation. So really look forward to seeing you again if you're able to join us. And I will make sure that, Abele, your recording gets up onto the CERS site with all the other ones that have gone up already in the last couple of weeks for this series. So, and thank you very much for your
Many thanks
time
to all for
day.
the very enriching dialogue we had as well at the end.
It's lovely. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Thank you, Abele, Lisa, Federico, and Tremaine. And look forward to seeing you all again in our future sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Grazie mille.
Grazie, ciao.